Thank you. Okay, all right, so we're going to get started. Our topic today is Yud Zayin Tammuz and the 3 weeks. I feel like this is a very important topic to discuss because here we are sitting in lovely Deal, New Jersey. It's the summer, we're having a great time, and then all of a sudden, this fast gets dropped into our lap, right? It sort of like breaks up the whole momentum of what we're used to. Not to mention the whole 3-week period that we're about to go through, which culminates in Tisha B'Av. And we kind of have to ask ourselves, do we really need to stop our summer for this? And what are we stopping it for, in a way? But as we know, this day and the next 3 weeks are part of the Jewish calendar. Every year it comes at this time. And we have to, I think, delve into a little bit of what's the significance of today and what's the significance of these 3 weeks. Tisha B'Av is probably more well known. Yud Zayin Tammuz is lesser known. It's one of the smaller fasts, right? We have 4 fasts that are associated with the smaller events, so to speak. But we want to look at them and we want to see what are we able to gain, from this analysis that we're going to do. And before we do it, I actually want to read something to you that I read recently, and I said this sounds really good. I want to share it with you. This was something that David Ben Gurion, who we all know was the first founder of the modern state of Israel and also the first prime minister. He was addressing the Peel Commission in 1936, and he says, about 300 years ago, a ship named Mayflower sailed into the New World. It was a great event in the history of England and America. But I would like to know if there is one Englishman who knows exactly when this ship set sail and how many Americans know when it set sail. Do they know how many people were on the same ship and what was the nature of the bread they ate when they left? And yet, Ben Gurion added, more than 3,300 years ago, before the Mayflower voyage, the Jews left Egypt, and every Jew in the world knows exactly what day they went out, on the 15th of Nisan, and everyone knows exactly what bread the Jews ate, matzah. To this day, Jews all over the world eat matzah on the 15th of Nisan, in America, Russia, and other countries, and tell the story of the Exodus and the troubles that befell the Jews from the Exodus until today. So I thought this was like an amazing quote, because really, this idea that there's really no other nation in the world that recalls our events, our history, over and over again. I'm not talking here specifically, obviously, about Pesach, but we're talking about the fact that, the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash happened thousands of years ago, and we're still sitting here in Deal, New Jersey, talking about it. And that's something very unique to the Jewish people, the idea that we recall these events and that our tradition is so important to us. And it's something that we want to pass on to the future generations, and that's why we're learning this. One of the classes today spoke about the fact that we're not only trying to pass on mourning, we're not trying to be morbid, right, and always just talking about death and destruction, all that. There's got to be something positive that comes out of it, right? There's something proactive about it that we want to get from it, and that's what we're hopefully gonna do today. So the term of these 3 weeks is called Ben HaMetzarim. Anybody know what that means? Ben HaMetzarim?
Narrow time?
Yeah, Mitzarim is, they call it the narrow streets. So where does this term come from? It comes from Echa, actually. Sorry? Mina Metzar Karat. Yeah, that's that's the right use of the term. From the depths I call to God. But here, this is coming from Echa, Perek Aleph, Pasuk Gimel. It says, Galta Yehuda, and by the way, I do apologize, I didn't prepare a source sheet. I meant to, but I kind of didn't have enough time. Galta Yehuda me'oni umerov avoda, hi yashva bagoyim, lo matza manoach, kol rodfea hisigua ben hametzarim. All right? So Yehuda, the Jewish people, were exiled, right? And she sat amongst the nations. She didn't have any rest. All those who were chasing after her, they kind of like caught up to her, ben hametzarim, right? In between these difficult, what they call the narrow straits, right? So we have Yud Zayin Tammuz, which is the date that, what happened on this day? What happened?
Breaking of the walls.
Right. There was the breaking of the siege that was laid around Jerusalem, and 3 weeks later, the second Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. Of course, it's also the day Tisha B'Av is also the day of the first Bet HaMikdash. So we're talking about 69 CE, very long time ago, and that's why we're fasting today, and it's actually pushed off fast. But yes, we are fasting on Yud Zayin Tammuz to commemorate the breach of the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, so why is Shiva Asar BeTamuz significant according to the Mishnah in Ta'anit? Now moving to Mishnah in Ta'anit, Parak Dal, Mishnah Vav. Chamishat Dvarim Ir'u et Avotenu b'Shiva Asar BeTamuz. There were 5 really bad events that happened on this day, Shiva Asar BeTamuz. Anybody want to guess what they were? Go ahead, take it away.
That's Exiled.
Keep going, go ahead.
That's like Lana.
That's all you know. Okay, fine.
Breaking.
Keep going, say again.
The breaking.
Breaking of Luchot. Okay, anybody else?
Korban Tamud.
Good, very nice. Keep going.
Wait, what did you say?
Korban Tamud.
Tamid, right?
Tamid.
Okay.
King Menashe.
What did he
What's
do?
his name? He brought the idol into the Mikdash.
Apostemos.
No.
Okay, keep going. Yeah.
And the Torah was burnt.
Nachon. Okay, so Chamisha Dvarim Ir'u et Avotenu. There were 5 things that happened on Shiva Asar BeTamuz. Nishtabru haluchot. Moshe, when he came down, saw that the Chet HaEgel was taking place. He broke the luchot. Batel hatamid. Tamid was the korban that was given in the Beit HaMikdash on a daily basis. Huvke'ah ha'ir, we just mentioned the idea that the siege was that the walls were broken. Saraf apostemos et haTorah. The Torah itself was actually burned in the Beit HaMikdash. And ha'emid tzelem be'echal. This apostemos, also this non-Jewish invader, he put a tzelem in the hechal. He put an idol in the Beit HaMikdash. It's, lahavdil, but like, could you picture, God forbid, something happening like right here? Like, picture something like that. Somebody from outside coming in and destroying, not only destroying, but doing something so antithetical to what the place is, right? So these are the things that happened, according to the Mishnah and Ta'anit, on Shiva Asar BeTamuz. And there's actually, we want to analyze just a little bit of each of these. The significance of, let's say, the burning of the Torah scroll, it's compared in the Midrash to the ripping of the Ketuvah. What's the Ketuvah? Is the marriage contract, right? So the idea that the Torah was burned is as if the contract that we have with God is just ripped apart. Like, picture any relationship that you have that's dear to you. Picture that relationship really coming apart. That's the significance of that point. Yeah.
Which Torah are we talking about? Like
Which Torah scroll you mean?
Yeah.
From what I understand, whatever was in existence at that time was said. Because don't forget, the kings at that time also, not the kings are later, but I'm saying they used to have the Torah scroll with them. What happened to the Klei HaMikdash is a much more interesting discussion, because we know in the Second Temple they didn't have the Shekhinah, they didn't have the same presence that they had in the first Beit HaMikdash. So that's the ripping of the Ketuvah, the marriage contract. What about putting an idol in the Beit HaMikdash? That signifies the end of any kind of like trust and loyalty. Like, this is my place, this is my go-to place, this is where I know what I can expect from the Beit HaMikdash. No, now it's like a totally foreign place, it's a totally foreign entity. So what's so interesting here is that there is definitely a physical ruin. Like, if I asked you, if I woke you up in the middle of the night and said, what are the 3 weeks about and what are we fasting? I'd say, oh, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, right? And we all talk about the physical destruction. But what we see as we look further into the sources is that there was actually a spiritual destruction which preceded this physical destruction. And that's also what I want to focus on for a minute here. And I want to do this because why? I think it's really hard for us to try to mourn something we never experienced, right? You talk about the Beit HaMikdash, it's like a concept that none of us have we don't have really anything to compare it to, right? It's a hard idea. So this idea of like trying to see if we can get into a sense of, well, what went wrong here and what was actually being missed. So there's another Gemara that talks about this idea in Sanhedrin. This Gemara talks about this idea that even before the invaders came and our enemies came and destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, we were really destroyed from within. Yeah, that there was this internal destruction. So what is it? It says here in the Gemara, it's like a personification of Jerusalem, who's talking to Bavel, right? Bavel, this is the time of Bavel, came to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. So Yerushalayim is talking to Bavel and says, a dead lion you have killed, ground flour you have ground, a burnt city you have burnt, a destroyed temple you have destroyed. What do you think? What does that mean to you?
You did it to yourself.
And what was going on at that time? We all know, yeah.
It's like spiritually, like there was nothing there, so like them burning it down was kind of just like the end. Like it wasn't the start, it wasn't all their fault. Like we did something to deserve that.
Isn't that when I read this was like very new to me. It was like a wild
Who
concept.
wrote that?
So this is from the Gemara, and it's a midrash describing Jerusalem talking to Bavel. It's as if the city is talking to its conqueror and saying, you know, you guys think you did such a great job. You came and you burnt us down, and you got us. We were destroyed from before you even came. It's like I have chills thinking about it. It's like an amazing. So how does it come to be? So actually, I read this other article that I wanted to share with you, which I thought was also very good. She says here, this is Sivan Rachav Meir, for those of you who don't know, she's really excellent. If we lack faith or motivation, if we are divided, if we forget our identity and tradition, if we become addicted to extremist struggles, instead of dealing with the essence, with what is important, we are the burners and the destroyers. So what she's talking about is this idea that the society itself, we all know, if I asked you again, why was the Beit HaMikdash destroyed? What are you going to say? Sinat Chinam, right? And what is Sinat Chinam? Translates into baseless hatred. But what it means also is this idea that we're really divided. We're really in camps. We're not united. Jerusalem is now an extreme city, a divided city. And we're going to illustrate this now with the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa in a minute. But this idea that Babel came to destroy, and yet we were already destroyed from within. So the destruction of the physical temple is really just an outcome of what was happening on the inside. This also, by the way, is echoed, I'm sorry to say, by a current day enemy of the Jews, Hassan Nasrallah, who's the head of Hezbollah. Who is hiding right now because he knows if he peeks his head up, he will be assassinated. But he is in charge of Hezbollah, and he has this like spiderweb speech that he gives where he basically says that, you know, he knows that it's not the tanks and the nuclear weapons that would ultimately save the Jews, or how could we harm the Jews? It's just knowing that if they don't have an inner resilience, that if the Jews can't keep it together, if they can't stay united, if they can't stay on course, he says, then the Jews are like cobwebs, that they're just gonna like disintegrate. Like that's how they're, it's a sad, sad thing, but it's the story of the Jews, right? When we're not united, when we're not together, when we're not on course with what our mission is, it's very easy for everybody from the outside, the enemies from the outside, to come and to God forbid, destroy us. So that's just a little bit about what was going on in the inside. And now to give you an illustration, we'll talk about the most, I think it's one of the most popular stories, probably is the most popular story, trying to show the, the society and what it looked like during the time of the destruction. So we all know the story, or we've heard of it, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa in the Gemara. All right, I'll tell it over briefly unless somebody else wants to. No? Okay, here we go. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. This is another famous story that illustrates this divided city of Jerusalem. It's the most famous among them. This is taking place during Bayit Sheni. The Gemara in Gittin speaks about how because of Kamsa, these are people, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, Jerusalem was destroyed. What was the story? What could possibly have happened? There's a wealthy man that accidentally invited someone by the name of Bar Kamsa instead of Kamsa. Kamsa was the friend, Bar Kamsa was the enemy of this wealthy man. So Bar Kamsa thought, hey, this wealthy man maybe wants to be my friend now. I'm gonna go and let me see what's the story. Comes to this banquet, comes to this feast, and the whole story, as it goes, just very briefly, the wealthy man realized that this guy came and not Kamsa, goes over to him and asks him to leave. Doesn't offer any other possibility, even though Bar Kamsa asked, I really don't want to be embarrassed here. I'm in front of so many people. Can I at least pay for my meal, whatever I eat, whatever I drink, I'll pay for, just to avoid embarrassment. And the wealthy man not only refuses, but physically rejects him and ejects him and embarrasses him from the party. So as it turned out, there were also chachamim sitting there. This is the part a lot of us don't really get, but there were rabbis sitting there at this banquet, right? And they didn't say anything. They didn't say anything when this was going on. So what do you think Bar Kamsa thought when he realizes he's being ejected from this party and the rabbis are sitting there, not saying anything? What do you think he thought?
The rabbis approved?
Yeah, that they approved. So of course he was filled with anger, filled with humiliation, filled with shame. And Bar Kamsa goes to the Romans at that point with all this terrible feeling, and he says the Jews are rebelling against you because the Romans are in charge at that point. And so what happens? Of course, that's when the Romans come in and start the end. So interestingly enough, we all know the story, but something I think we might not know as well, that the Gemara finds them both guilty. Why is Kamsa guilty? He didn't do anything. He was supposed to be invited to a party. He wasn't invited to the party, and yet it's saying that Kamsa is also guilty. Kamsa was the one who the wealthy man liked. He didn't get invited to the party. So why does the Gemara say that both of them are guilty? And that's why Jerusalem was destroyed. Anybody want to offer any kind of idea? Like, theoretically, he wasn't involved. So this is the genius of the story, is that it shows that Kamsa was part of a society that was so splintered that it was only groups, right? Groups get invited. This is not a unified family community atmosphere, right? This is, oh, you're my friend, I invite you. You're not my friend, I have nothing to do with you, maybe I even hate you. So this Kamsa was also guilty. He was guilty of being a member, being part of this exclusive club, right? This idea that I'm part of this group, nobody else is. And guys, does this sound familiar to anybody? This social kind of splintering that goes on, this idea that like, I'm in my group and mine, and you're in yours, and you're in yours. And this is like a snapshot of the society that existed prior to the, prior to the destruction. So this idea of a splintered society, and when people are able to be embarrassed in such a way, very, very difficult. And it's interesting that it's not something that's so far-fetched also, right? It's something that's pretty relatable. Okay, so this idea of, as we said, looking at the Khurban, looking at the destruction, not so much as an external occurrence, even though it was external, we did have enemies that came and destroyed us, but also from the inside, and talking about what goes on for us on the inside, and looking at these stories that kind of illustrate what society looked like then. Why are we doing this? Like Rambam says, we have to look at these days not just as historical events, guys. Right? We're not just commemorating a historical event. Rambam says we have to really look at this as something that we are experiencing even now. How so? I'm trying to get to which source did I want to read to you now? Hold on. So here Rambam says, and this is now I'm reading from Hilchot Ta'aniyot, and by the way, if anybody wants these sources after, I'm happy to send them over. Rambam says, יש שם ימים שכל ישראל מתעניינים בהם מפני הצרות שהראו בהן כדי לעורר הלבבות לפתוח דרכי התשובה. So Rambam says there are certain days when all of the Jews come together and fast and afflict themselves because of all the bad events that took place. Why? In order לעורר הלבבות. What does it mean לעורר הלבבות? To awaken us, like to get us to think, right? Guys, if we didn't have Shiva BeTamuz, I'm not sure how many of us would like stop and think about these events, right? We're too busy going to the beach, having fun, and that's great, but we wouldn't stop, right? So these days are designed to stop us, to get us to think about these things. But it also says liftoach darkei tshuva, to open up these paths of repentance. V'yezeh zikaron l'maaseinu hara'im u'maaseh avotenu. So Rambam says something very interesting here. He goes, and it's supposed to be, these fast days and commemoration days are supposed to be a remembrance for the bad things that our forefathers did, right? And he continues, he says, Shehaya kema'asenu ata. This was like a hard thing for me to read. It's not just that it happened then, and it was a bad thing that happened then, let's say what we just described, but it's happening now. Ma'asenu ata, meaning like what's going on right now. Ad shegaram lahem velanu otana taro. It's like a connection, meaning what went on then, the evil acts, whatever went on that wasn't good, that happened then, is also in essence happening now, happening amongst us now. And it's causing us the same kinds of tzarot. It's causing us the same kinds of difficulties. שבזיכרון דברים אלו נשוב להיטיב שנאמר ויפדו את עוונם ואת עוון אבותם. So Rambam says we're going to eventually get to a place where, because we're going to be open now, and because we're going to be remembering, and because we're going to be thinking, and we're going to be, God willing, correcting all these mistakes, both from previous generations and in our generation, we're going to delineate what we did wrong, and we're gonna move forward and get to a better place. That's the whole purpose, Rambam says, for all of us, right? It's not just to make us hungry. It's not just to make us stop what we're doing. It's to get us to move into like a different direction. And now you can probably better understand a very tough statement that's been said in the Gemara. So I just want to read it to you. Where did I write it? And the notes are everywhere. Hold on one second. It says that in every generation that the Beit HaMikdash has not been built, it's as if that generation is when it was destroyed. Now that's a tough thing to hear, right? So once again, I want to find you the Hebrew word. Hold on one second if I find it. Did I wrote it? All right, I paraphrased it for you. The idea again, that in every generation that the Beit HaMikdash was not built, it's as if that in that generation it was destroyed. How can you guys understand that? Isn't that really difficult? Here, Kol Dor she'eino nivna b'yamav. This is from Yerushalmi in Yoma. Kol Dor she'eino nivna b'yamav Beit HaMikdash ki'ilu charav b'yamav. It's as if it was destroyed in that generation. How are you ladies to understand that? That's tough to hear.
So it's like we're not good enough for the new Beit HaMikdash?
Did we fully correct?
We're doing the same thing.
Are we doing the same things? Like it's very severe. Now it's becoming more like we're sitting on edge a little bit, right? This is not just a comfortable historical event that happened then and we're just commemorating it. This is something that right now, this minute, we have to say to ourselves, wait a second, we still didn't do our job if we haven't gotten to the place where we can say, again, it's not it is the physical building of the Beit HaMikdash, but that's not the end goal, right? What does the building of the Beit HaMikdash or the existence of the Beit HaMikdash mean to us? What do you think that would mean? Because again, we weren't there, we haven't experienced it. What do you imagine that it would be? Like, what does it represent? Anyone have an idea? Well, think about just even when you feel like, I don't know, think about the time that you feel most spiritually connected to Jews, Judaism, and God and everything. Sorry?
Unity.
Right. This idea of unity, this idea of being connected to God. We have this like really, the example was given, which I thought was a really good example. Like imagine if we thought that, I would say marriage, but let's do friendship here. Let's say friendship consisted of sending a text message to your friend once a week and maybe seeing them twice a year. What kind of friendship would that be like? It would be like kind of weak, right? It wouldn't be so vibrant. But imagine if you were able to have a friendship where on a daily basis you even saw that friend, you communicated with that friend, you had some sort of, mutual experiences together. So that's sort of the idea when it comes to, when we talk about the Beit HaMikdash, which was essentially a spiritual center. It was a spiritual center to which all hearts were connected. Even to this day, by the way, what unites the Jews all over the world more than anything? If you had to pick like one thing, what unites them?
Tragedy.
Say again?
Tragedy.
That too, you're right. You're right. That does do. Well, okay, so at least that's the feeling of we're together in this. But yeah, Israel. Although I say that and then I take it back. I say, I don't know if I can say that these days, but I hope I can. Forget Israel, even say Jerusalem, right? Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is this like force that like it bonds all Jews around the world, no matter what Jew, how many different languages you hear going through Jerusalem streets, right? Unbelievable. It's the beating heart of the Jewish people. So now picture the Beit HaMikdash as this epicenter of all the Jewish people, everyone coming to it. And we just don't realize what we're missing because we never really experienced that. But that idea of having that level of unity, that level of connection to God and things spiritual that we have to strive so hard to get to, guys. How much do we have to work to get to this feeling of like, feeling of like, really like inner mindfulness and connection both to ourselves and to this higher being that we call Hashem. We don't realize it, but that really is the essence of what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to that era and that time of Geulah, of redemption, on a personal level and on a national level. So these are some of the thoughts that I have when we talk about like what are we missing and what are we striving for. On the flip side, does anybody have any questions, by the way? You can stop me. I'm used to a class where it's very noisy. No? Okay. on another level, we have a flip side to this, not just the negative of like any generation that didn't rebuild the Beit HaMikdash as if it was destroyed, but we also have something, I'll give you like a little bit of the end first, that everybody who mourns for Jerusalem is also, according to Chazal, going to be zocheh, to see its rebuilding. So, kol hamitaber al Yerushalayim zocheh v'ro'eh b'simchata, v'she'eno mitaber al Yerushalayim eno ro'eh b'simchata. So, part of our work in mourning is, somebody who feels it so strongly, also, according to Chachamim, is promised that they're going to have some part in the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash and of the Geulah. So, in order to merit this happiness, we also have to mourn. It's also said, by the way, I don't know how many of you have heard this, but that when a person lives, it's 120 and they go to Shamayim, one of the questions that they're asked is Tzipita leYeshua. What does it mean, Tzipita leYeshua? Anybody?
Like they wait for redemption.
Right. Tzipita is more than just like even passively like waiting for redemption. It's like, did you anticipate? Were you proactive about redemption? This idea that we've spoken about this in Israel a lot, but the idea of like hoping for messianic times, right? This is something that we have to actively pursue. It's not something that we just sit back and wait for, right? We have to act, and how do we pursue it? How do we get to it? What would you say would be a way of anticipating messianic times, redemption? What do we have to do as individuals?
Learning, correcting, doing
100%, all of that, and connecting with
unity.
100%. All of that is part of what it takes in order to get to redemption. So this idea, and it's also, of course, one of Yud Gimel Karim, right? We talked about this, the idea that we have to wait for Mashiach, anticipate Mashiach. It's not something that we passively wait for. It's something that our lives have to exemplify it. That's exactly what Tzipita Yeshua is. When we live our lives, so we know this is a great world that we're in, this is a great situation that we're in, but we don't stop here, right? This isn't all that there is. There's more, even if we don't know what it is because we haven't experienced it, but we know and we're promised that there's this better existence. And that's what the Beit HaMikdash symbolizes, right? Talk about universal peace. Everybody, I told you this, right? If you looked at the UN, United Nothing, somebody told me once. It's great. That it says on the United Nations, it's the pasuk from Yeshaya that describes how there's going to be universal peace. That's really what Messianic Times is about, universal peace. And so this idea has filtered out hopefully it's filtered out via the Jews into the world, that there doesn't need to be war, and there doesn't need to be poverty, and there doesn't even need to be sickness if we work together to discover the cures, etc. And this is the goal of what we're trying to reach, is this era of redemption. It's not something specifically Jewish, by the way. The Jews are the ones that lead the way, so to speak, but it's to bring the whole world to this vision. So, does anybody have a watch? I don't know what time it is. I don't know how long I've been speaking.
5:35.
Okay, so we have just a couple more minutes. I just want to talk a little bit more practically now that we went so high up in the clouds. Now let's go down for a minute and just look at the actual laws of the 3 weeks and see how it kind of helps us, because we could say it really is tough to mourn for something we have no idea, that we never experienced, but Chachamim actually help us. They help us kind of get into the mood, so to speak, of what we're supposed to be experiencing, and that's with the actual structure of what we're doing here. So for the next couple of weeks. So no one should know, but when a person is in mourning, it's an avelut chadasha. I mean, somebody who, God forbid, lost a loved one. It's going from a very severe feeling of loss to a lesser feeling of loss as time goes on. Because initially there's the initial loss, and then there's the Shiv'ah, which is the 7 days, then there's the month, which is the 30 days, and then there's the year, and the severity of the mourning kind of lessens. It's a very amazing psychological tool to help us grieve properly. So that's in terms of the regular avelut that we unfortunately come to know. But then there's something called avelut yeshana, which is this old kind of avelut, which is what we're actually experiencing now. This is an old avelut, right? Thousands of years old. And what's interesting is that when you look at the 3 weeks, it actually goes from the least severe to the gradually more severe, culminating in Tisha B'Av. sort of like gradually getting us into this feeling that we're supposed to be having. So for today, yes, we're fasting, and there's no weddings and parties and things like that. Eventually, we get to the 9 days, and by this is very different for Ashkenazim and Sephardim. You definitely want to be Sephardic during this time. Ashkenazim are from this day really taking on a lot of stringencies. The most difficult one, no, I don't know if they don't do laundry from now. Could that be?
I think it's
No,
from the 9
no,
days.
that's
From the
9 days.
and
That would be
then
really
also
bad if it was
shuffle.
3 weeks. Yeah,
No,
They-
that can't be. They don't do laundry for 9 days.
for sure.
No,
I have
no,
good
no,
friends. I have good friends, Sari.
I don't believe it.
Good friends. I'm telling you.
You do
you.
one day.
No, I know. So Sephardim are. It's a little bit easier in the sense that a lot of what we take on is in what they call Shavua Shechalbo, is the week that Tisha B'Av falls. That's when we have the most severe limitations. But I'm talking about this idea of going from, not having the parties to, for men, not cutting their hair the week of Tisha B'Av, new clothing, no new clothing, music, there's the idea of not listening to music. So this whole process of these laws bringing us into from the least severe to the more severe is all in an effort to have us be able to relate. That's really what it is. Because otherwise, how would we? Like, how would we get into it? It's really like a hard thing to relate to. And this idea that Chazal, that Chachamim are actually pushing us beyond our comfort zone, right? We always say that, and you've heard this so many times this year, the idea that when does growth really take place?
When you're through your struggles.
Yeah. When we're in a place of discomfort, or we're in a place of not so familiar, or in a place of I don't feel like I'm at my best. That's when we start to push through, and growth starts to really kick in. This is true on a physical level, right? Muscles don't get stronger if they're not challenged, right? So I see this also definitely spiritually for us, that when we push beyond our comfort zone, and so that's what we're doing here. We're really stopping our regular lives, so to speak, and we're incorporating something that feels very foreign to us. Doesn't feel like natural, but we're incorporating it because this is where growth is supposed to happen. All right, so just to start to come to pull all this together. So as we said before,
Also, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, on that note,
Go ahead.
like, I feel like not even growth, like, even to work to maintain is hard. Like, it's like sometimes you don't even get anywhere, but you have to work hard just to like be where you are.
100%, because there are always forces around us,
Right.
like
hurdles
pulling us,
right.
and there are influences we are aware of, not aware of. Like, it's work. You're right, just to maintain our growth and where we're at. I'm sure you guys have felt that, right? In spades, this idea of like, just have to work hard in order to be who you want to be, maintain your values, maintain your strengths. But yeah, if you want to go even further, there's even more work to be done. Okay, so as we said, the purpose of the morning is really not for us to just be uncomfortable, but to motivate us to get to a point where we're better than we were when we went in. Like something has to move within us so that we come out of this in a better place. Okay, and going back to the Yerushalmi that we read, again, we say if we don't correct what went wrong, if we don't correct what goes wrong now in the present, it's basically a continuation of that same root cause of what went on generations ago. So we have to make sure that we're doing our very best efforts to, as we said before, engage in teshuvah. Teshuvah is like a word that I don't know if we're hung up on it, but it's improvement, guys. It's self-improvement. Everything that we do, just like our physical body regenerates every day, every few hours, I don't know. Same thing spiritually. When we wake up the next day, we have to be different than we were the day before, right? We have to be on an upward movement. So this is on an individual level, and this is also on a national level as well. Okay, so you know what I want to do? I want to just read to you. Let me just see if there was anything else I wanted to. One last thought though about this idea of mourning. Besides mourning the Beit HaMikdash itself, we're really also grieving the loss of the potential that was. Because think about it not just by what's missing, but what could have been, right? So if we imagine a place where We really are so connected to one another, and we care. Like, think of the opposite of the Bar Kamsa story. Picture a society where there's no social tension, guys. Anybody picture that for a moment? What does that look like? Like that we don't have to feel social tension, that we don't, our class in Lashon Tov would go out the window, right? This idea of no social tension, and you might say, oh, that's not realistic, but it could be. You guys have good friends where there isn't social tension. It exists in little forms, right? So the idea of looking at that and saying, this is something that I want to be a part of. I want to try to make broader society part of what I'm trying to create for myself on an individual level. So yeah, we lost a lot, and that's what we're mourning. We lost the actual physical foundation. We lost the potential, and also in terms of our relationship with God. Do you guys still feel like? I'm sure you do. You still feel that like boost of connection to God when you come to Israel, or am I just being like stardust? No, I don't know. I don't know if I'm just like somebody who's like smitten, or if like it happens to other people too. But this idea of having that connection to God. On a very deep level, and Eretz Yisrael is compared to the body, whereas Bnei Yisrael is compared to the soul, right? This combination of body and soul. So we need Israel, because that's where our potential is actualized. We have our own country, our own state, own this. This is where, by the way, it's also very hard, because it is where we can actualize potential, but it's also where we look around, like, I know, because I live there, and I say, oh my gosh, like what we're missing. Like, there's potential, but when we don't fulfill it and we have the actual ability, it's like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And then Bnei Israel represents, the Jews represent the soul. The soul is what gives us meaning and direction in life. It's the spiritual, the moral vision. And in Israel, we enjoy that on a national level. So this idea that we are commemorating today, that we went into exile, the process was starting to go into exile, that there was destruction. This is a national death of sorts. Right, we have to work so hard to keep Jews and Judaism together, and we're mourning the loss of that clarity, of that central place, of that solidarity, and that's what we're hoping to get back to. And with that, I want to read. I think I had it here. See how many different places I have everything written down, guys. One day I'll get it all into one spot. Hold on one second. Yeah, my phone that you don't like. Okay, one second. You like it, okay? Then you're my friend. Then you're my friend. I'm not even giving her any grades anymore now. Okay. Okay, let me see if I could do this. What happened? Here it is. Okay. So one last thought with this, we will end, but it's something that I like to do on fast days, because I feel like it's important to get into the head of like, what is the purpose of this fast and how should we be acting on a fast? It also helps us forget our hunger, right? So we learn from the Nevi'im. I always told you this, guys. You want to know what the reaction should be and what we should, you go back to the Torah. Torah tells us, it's a guidebook for life, it tells us how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to behave. So we go back to the Navi Yeshaya, and he says, Hakazeh yetzom evchareu Yom anot adam nafsho halakov ka'admon rosho v'sak ve'efa yatzia halazeh tikrat tzom v'yom retzon l'Hashem. Here Yeshaya is doing something, this is in chapter 58, he's saying something very, very scathing to the Jews. He's saying, like, you think this is the kind of fast that is desirable, where you kind of just like afflict yourselves, but yet you maintain, he's speaking to the Jews, maintain the behaviors and the things that are wrong. Halazeh tikrat tzom, is this what you call a fast day? That on the outside we're acting as if we're, really trying to be the best that we could be, but then on the inside, in terms of our relationships, we're not. Is this what God wants? The Yom Ratzon Hashem. Do you think God wants this? This is like really tough stuff, because here this is referring also in Bayit Rishon, the Jews were externally definitely practicing as Jews, and yet there was a lot of stuff going on between them that wasn't right, taking advantage of those who are weak, those who are without anybody to take care of them, right? We always talk about Yatom and Almanah, the widow and the orphan. Those were the ones who were the weakest members of society. The Navi is railing against a society that doesn't take care of its weakest members, right? That's the true sign of a moral society. So here Yeshaya is warning us about this idea of like trying to almost like pretend that we're really getting the message when we're not. What does he say is the answer? Halozet som evchareu, pateh hartzubot resha, hitir agudot mota, v'shalech v'tzutzim chofshiyim v'chol motah tenateko. Saying, what is the, did anybody get that, by the way? What is it that Yeshayahu is describing to us that we should do? Halo paros laraev lachmecha va'aniyim merudim tavi bayit ki tireh aron mikisito umibsarecha lo titalem. All of these psukim I just read talk about social justice. The idea of like if we see somebody who is hungry, we give them to eat. If we see somebody who doesn't have clothes, we give them clothing. We stop whatever is going on in society that is immoral and wrong and corrupt, and we start to build a better society. That's what the Navi says is a real, true fast, right? So you could say, oh, who am I? I'm only one person. I can't do all this. You know what? It starts with each one of us. Each one of us that does an act of kindness, does something for somebody else. This is how it begins. I'll read you two more sources and then I will stop speaking. Ko Amar Hashem Tzvakot. This is from Zechariah. Zechariah is the Navi that is prophesying in the second temple. Ko Amar Hashem Tzvakot. Tzom HaRavi v'Tzom HaChamishi v'Tzom HaShevi'i v'Tzom HaAsiri. These are all the four minor fasts that are associated with the destruction of the temple. Yihiyeh the Beit Yehuda lesason ulesimcha ulemoadim tovim v'ha'emet v'shalom ehavu. So Zechariah, who is prophesying the ultimate redemption, says all these fast days, Asar B'Tevet, Tzom Gedalia, Zayin Tammuz, right? All of these, they are going to turn into days of joy and days of redemption, and we just have to work toward it. And my bracha to all of us really is that we all find our place, like we all find our job. What's our job to do in order to get to this very amazing era of universal redemption, which Bezrat Hashem, we the Jews will bring to the world.
Amen.
So thank you guys very much. If anybody has